passed a bill, can if the clerks, there are clerks, the administrators of the National Assembly, clerks, National Assembly clerks, they are the ones to put, put everything in proper documentation before sending it to the presidency for assent. Now, at the point of those, when it has left the National Assembly floor, when it goes to those clerks, sometimes they can see maybe some grammatical errors or some mistakes, and they may want to correct it. So at the constitutional review they had, the question came up, can the clerk of the House of the National Assembly, can they make such corrections without going back to the House or the National Assembly to seek the approval? And it was said that it's not supposed to be. That if there are mistakes that were made, corrections that need to be made, if corrections were made, the copies ought to be sent back to the National Assembly for approval before it's sent to the president. Because that if the clerks in the National Assembly, if they make alterations, then it has changed what was passed. And then there will now be a legal jeopardy. I think it can be questioned whether what was gazetted, what was signed by the president is what was actually passed by the House. So from that experience now, so it can be noted that this thing has happened before. He said when the Niger Delta Development Commission, when the bill was passed, that there was a time that the act of the Niger Delta Development Commission, that there were two versions. There are two different versions, and that could have happened in this process. So the point is that when the bill has been passed by the National Assembly, the administrators, the civil servants, the clerks and the National Assembly, they could make some alterations if they see some grammatical errors and all that. Then it goes to the presidency. At the presidency, usually when bills come when they are approved by National Assembly, presidency has to review. So likely, since there's a committee on taxes and fiscal policy, likely the committee would review the bill that has been passed and now say, okay, this bill is okay. Then they now advise the president to give his assent. Or it could be the Ministry of Finance, or there are those in the presidency that will review whatever is coming from the National Assembly, then give it to the president to sign. Then after this thing is signed, then there's an official gazette. The official gazette is the official document that shows, okay, this is the law, and it's published and it should be accessible to all Nigerians so that they can get copies and read it and know what the law says. So at each of these points, there could be issue of alteration. Even before it leaves the National Assembly, there can be alteration. When it gets to the presidency, before the president signs it, there can be alteration. After the president has signed it, there can also be alteration. But going by what the former House of Representatives is saying, that such should not be the case. And going by the example that was in time of President Buhari, that if they notice any alterations, then it should be sent back to the National Assembly. So in this case now, having seen, as revealed by Honorable Abdulsamad Dasuki, that there are changes between what was passed at the National Assembly and what's in the official gazette, the solution now is that the act has to be suspended. The implementation of the act is supposed to start on January 1st, 2026. So leaving it like this and allowing it exposes the act to legal redress or legal jeopardy, as people can take the issue to court and question the legality of the act. So the presidency ought to send it back to the National Assembly. So the National Assembly will look at it again and see if they can approve the additional sections that were added to the official gazette, or if they will remove it, and make their own adjustments to it. So that should be the case, and that I think should happen. Now, why would, if let's say it happened at the state of, I don't think it happened at the National Assembly. This alteration did not happen at National Assembly, because I don't think the clerks or the administrative staff in National Assembly would feel uh, bold enough to make this kind of huge alterations that kind of empower people not just to investigate but to arrest. I don't think so. I suspect that this alteration is coming at the level of the presidency. Since there is a special committee on taxes and fiscal policy headed by Taiwo Oyodele, and I have not heard any comment from Taiwo Oyodele or from that committee. I've not seen any press statement. They've not come to address this issue. I suspect it's possible that that committee was trying to be clever by half. That because the bill was quite contentious, and if you watch the interviews that was granted by Taiwo Oyedele after the bill was passed, and it was an act of parliament, it became law, he said, and if my memory serves me right, he said they couldn't get all the things they wanted. They wanted more, but because of a lot of political pressure, especially from the governors and all that, they couldn't get all they wanted. Is it possible? I'm just positing. I'm not saying that is the case. Is it possible that since they couldn't get all they wanted from the National Assembly, when the bill came to them, did they make alterations to it? Before the president assented to it? Is it possible? What will give a committee, or what will give people in the presidency the guts to want to alter something that has been passed by the National Assembly? What would encourage them to do that? This is why we talk about the National Assembly being rubber stamped, and whatever the presidency asks them to do is what they approve. Look at today's presentation of the budget by the president, and we see them, before the president started presenting the budget, they were singing On Your Mandate, which is a political song that was sung during the election or something, being sang at the National Assembly. After singing the national anthem, the next thing is to sing On Your Mandate. This is the National Assembly is an independent, we have three arms of government, co-equal, independent of each other. You have the executive, you have the legislature, and have the judiciary. The National Assembly is the legislative arm of government. They are co-equal, they are independent. They have oversight function to check the executive, and they have the powers to make laws, which they've done in this Tax Act. If the National Assembly was really doing its job of proper oversight, if they are really doing what they ought to do, if they are not being rubber stamped, if the executive has respect for the National Assembly, would anyone in the presidency think of making changes to the tax bill? If the changes came from the presidency, would anyone consider doing that? If they fear what the repercussion will be from the National Assembly? If you have a National Assembly that looks like they will always kowtow to whatever the executive wants, then you can have a situation like this. I think some people were trying to be clever by half, thinking that these changes will not be noticed and they can just quietly pass it, and then the implementation starts. you know, which is quite unfortunate. So since this issue has been brought to light, this issue of tax is something that has been controversial from day one. For many years, Nigeria has not changed its tax laws, because when you want to change the law, it's always controversial. So in 2025, President Tinubu was able to get the new tax law in place. In spite of all the opposition from governors and all that, they reached a compromise and they got it. And then we are now saying that some changes were slipped in after the National Assembly has passed it. And then we hear that the Federal Inland Revenue Service entered into a memorandum of understanding with France, with French tax agency, and we don't know the details of that. And there's a freedom, the body has filed for freedom of information request, so that the details of that memorandum of understanding is brought to light. A lot of people are already complaining of what the effects of the tax law will be on 2026 January, when the implementation starts. So this thing is really starting on a very bad and controversial footing. It's very bad and controversial. And if, as we've seen, we said the president listens, when there's a backlash, when people complain, he listens, and we've seen that, like when they pardoned Mariam Sanda and other people, there was a backlash and it was reversed, and there have been some policy that's backlash and they are reversed. I just hope in that same light, the president will look at this issue. Like we saw the removal of the heads of the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Agency and the upstream person, based on the social media and TV revelations by Dangote that the person was involved in GBOs, was involved in quote corruption, allegations of corruption and all that. And so if the president can be responsive towards addressing some of these issues, then this thing is a matter of really urgent concern. You cannot start on this foot. The law is to start implementation is supposed to start in January. I think I'm of the view that the implementation should be delayed. The bill is, if they quickly approve the new nominees for the position, those that were fired from the regulatory bodies in the oil sector, and their replacement have been quickly been approved. So if the president sees this as a matter of urgency, national emergency, it could send it back to the National Assembly for appropriate corrections to be made on this issue. And those who are responsible for making these alterations need to be called out, and they need to be sanctioned for what they have done. So that was on that issue.